Imagine walking through a museum, stopping in front of a photograph from 1850, and having no idea that what you're looking at is a complete fabrication. This isn't science fiction. This actually happened at a prestigious museum in New Orleans for 3 entire decades. Someone deliberately altered a historical photograph, covering up the truth about a wealthy black woman's identity, and nobody noticed until 2018. What I'm about to show you will completely change how you think about museum artifacts and historical preservation. This isn't just about one photograph. This is about how easily history can be rewritten to fit someone's personal beliefs, and how that erasure can go undetected for generations. Stay with me, because this investigation gets darker and more shocking as we go deeper. Before we dive into this incredible true story, if you're fascinated by real historical mysteries and cover-ups like this, do me a favor and smash that like button right now. Subscribe to the channel and hit that notification bell so you never miss another mind-blowing story like this one. Trust me, you're going to want to see what we uncover together. Now let's get into it. Picture this scene. New Orleans, 1850. The city is buzzing with life, trade, culture, and a complex social structure that most history books oversimplify or ignore completely. In a photographer's studio somewhere in the French Quarter, a woman prepares to have her portrait taken. She's dressed impeccably for this moment. This woman sits with a posture that speaks of confidence and education. Her hands rest gracefully in her lap, fingers interlaced with elegant precision. Her gaze meets the camera lens directly, unflinching, with a quiet strength that demands respect. She wears a tignon, that's the traditional head wrap worn by free women of color in antebellum New Orleans, arranged in an intricate pattern that required both skill and cultural knowledge to execute properly. But here's where the story gets interesting. What she's wearing transforms this from just another historical portrait into something extraordinary, something that would later make a conservator so uncomfortable that she'd commit an unthinkable act. Draped around this woman's neck is a stunning white lace collar. We're not talking about some simple piece of fabric here. This collar features threadwork so detailed, so precise, that expert hands would have needed weeks to create it. Each loop, each delicate pattern represents hours of skilled craftsmanship. At her throat sits an oval pearl brooch, its surface still luminous even after more than a century and a half. The metal setting appears to be either gold or silver, expensive materials reserved for jewelry of significant value. Small gold earrings frame her face, catching the available light in the photographer's studio. The dress she's wearing is crafted from fine fabric with sleeves that have been carefully tailored to fit her frame perfectly. This wasn't something you could just purchase off a rack. This was custom clothing made specifically for her, the kind of garment only the wealthy could commission. Now here's a fact that'll blow your mind. In 1850, having your photographic portrait taken cost what an average working person would earn over several months. Photography was cutting-edge technology at the time, and it was expensive. The process required specialized equipment, chemical knowledge, and artistic skill. But this woman didn't just pay for the photograph itself, that elaborate gold leaf frame surrounding the image. That represented an additional substantial investment. Families only spent that kind of money when they wanted their legacy preserved with dignity and prominence for future generations. Let me be crystal clear about what we're looking at here. This was not a servant. This was not someone of modest means trying to look wealthier than she actually was. This was a prosperous, educated, free black woman who possessed the financial resources to commission an expensive photograph and the self-assurance to present herself exactly as she was, elegantly dressed, adorned with valuable jewelry, sitting with the bearing of someone who was accustomed to being treated with respect in her community. The photograph eventually found its way to the Riverside Museum of Southern Art in New Orleans. Museum staff acquired it in 1985 as part of a larger collection from the Clemens estate. They hung it in Gallery 7, one of the museum's quieter exhibition spaces. A small brass placard accompanied the frame, reading simply, "Unknown free woman of color, circa 1850. Photographer unknown." For 3 years following its acquisition, museum visitors could observe this image exactly as it was meant to be seen, as a testament to black prosperity and dignity during an era when such photographic documentation was both rare and precious. School groups passed through Gallery 7. Tourists exploring New Orleans culture stopped to read the placard. Researchers studying the antebellum period examined the photograph as part of their investigations into social structures of the time. Everything seemed normal. The photograph hung peacefully on the wall, a window into a past that challenged simplistic narratives about race, class, and opportunity in the pre-Civil War South. But in 1988, something happened that would fundamentally alter this piece of history for the next 30 years. The museum administration hired Patricia Thornton, a conservator from Baton Rouge with a well-established professional reputation, to perform restoration work on several pieces in their collection. Patricia had spent 15 years in the field. Her technical skills were beyond reproach. Other institutions trusted her with their valuable artifacts. Her resume was impressive, her references glowing. When Patricia unwrapped the photograph in her conservation laboratory, she studied it for an extended period. The lace collar drew her attention immediately, then the pearl brooch, the gold earrings, the fine dress with its carefully tailored sleeves. Something about what she was seeing disturbed her on a fundamental level. You see, Patricia had been raised with very specific narratives about the antebellum South. Her parents revered Southern history, or at least their particular interpretation of it. Her father taught at a small college where he specialized in antebellum Louisiana. Growing up in that household, Patricia had absorbed countless lessons about that era, lessons about social order, about supposed racial hierarchies, about how free black women were expected to present themselves in public. She'd been taught that even prosperous free black women understood certain limits. Yes, they could own property. Absolutely, they could run businesses. Some even accumulated significant wealth through their entrepreneurial efforts. But according to Patricia's upbringing, they dressed modestly. They avoided drawing attention to themselves. They certainly didn't adorn themselves with elaborate lace and valuable pearls, like white women of the planter class supposedly did. This photograph contradicted everything Patricia believed she knew about that historical period. It didn't fit the narrative she'd internalized since childhood. It challenged her worldview at its foundation. So Patricia made a decision that would hide the truth for 3 decades. On a humid April morning in 1988, Patricia sat alone in her conservation lab. The photograph lay on her work table under bright examination lights. She had already completed her preliminary technical analysis, documenting the image's physical condition in her notebook with the careful precision that had built her professional reputation. But her notes revealed nothing about what she was planning to do next. Patricia mixed black paint on her palette, adjusting the tone meticulously until it matched the aged darkness of the photograph's natural shadows. Her hands remained steady throughout the process. After 15 years of restoration work, her technical ability was unquestionable. She knew exactly how to apply paint to a delicate surface without damaging the underlying image. The technique itself wasn't the issue. The question wasn't about her capability to do what she was planning. The question was whether she should do it at all. She looked at the lace collar again. It was undeniably beautiful. The threadwork demonstrated remarkable craftsmanship. Whoever had created that collar possessed genuine skill and artistic talent. But that wasn't relevant to her, she told herself. What mattered was what she perceived as historical accuracy, or rather, her version of what history should look like. Patricia had convinced herself of something that simply wasn't true. She decided the photograph must have been altered sometime after 1850. Perhaps a descendant had added the lace and jewelry later, she theorized, trying to elevate their ancestors' social status. Maybe another conservator decades ago had made romantic additions to beautify the image. Whatever explanation she invented, she determined these elegant elements couldn't possibly be original to the 1850 photograph. She was correcting an error, she told herself. She was restoring what she believed to be historical truth, even though she had absolutely no evidence to support her assumption. With a fine brush gripped firmly in her experienced hand, Patricia began painting over the lace collar. She worked slowly, methodically, covering each delicate thread with dark paint. The intricate pattern disappeared beneath her careful brushstrokes. She moved to the pearl brooch next, obscuring its luminous surface until it vanished completely into shadow. The gold earrings followed the same fate, then the fine details visible in the dress sleeves. With each stroke of her brush, the woman in the photograph underwent a transformation. The visible markers of wealth and social status disappeared one by one. What emerged from Patricia's alterations was an image that fit more comfortably into her understanding of the past. A woman dressed plainly, modestly, without any pretension to elegance or prosperity. The process took her 3 full days. When Patricia finally stepped back to examine her completed work, the woman in the photograph now looked exactly as Patricia believed she should have looked in 1850. The image now matched Patricia's preconceptions about how a free black woman would have presented herself during that era. That afternoon, Patricia wrote her conservation report. Under the section labeled Treatment Performed, she documented surface cleaning completed, minor stabilization of emulsion, original integrity maintained. That final sentence was a deliberate falsehood, but Patricia had convinced herself so thoroughly that it represented truth. The altered photograph returned to Gallery 7 in May 1988. Museum staff members hung it back in its previous location, under that same small brass placard identifying it as Unknown Free Woman of Color, circa 1850. But now, visitors encountered something fundamentally different from what the photograph had originally shown. The woman still sat in that same dignified pose, her bearing still conveyed that same quiet confidence, but her clothing now appeared simple and dark. No elaborate lace collar drew visitors' eyes, no pearl brooch caught the gallery lighting, no gold earrings gleamed against her skin. She resembled countless other historical photographs of working-class women from that era. Respectable, but unremarkable, nothing that would cause viewers to pause for an extended examination. Most museum visitors walked past the photograph without giving it a second glance. Thomas Brennan, serving as the museum's director at that time, noticed the photograph had returned from conservation work but didn't examine it closely. He had 36 other pieces demanding his attention, budget meetings filling his calendar, and a major exhibition scheduled to open in 6 weeks. Patricia's invoice indicated the restoration work was complete and satisfactory. He signed the payment authorization and redirected his focus to other institutional matters. The museum's annual report published that year made no mention of the photograph whatsoever. It was considered a minor piece within a large, diverse collection, not particularly notable, not worth featuring in promotional materials or special exhibitions designed to attract visitors. Years passed quietly. The photograph hung in Gallery 7, accumulating dust between the museum's periodic cleaning schedules. Multiple generations of visitors walked through that exhibition space. School groups arrived to learn about Southern history. Tourists exploring New Orleans culture wandered through. Researchers studying the antebellum period examined various artifacts. Some visitors paused to read the brass placard. Most simply continued walking. In 1995, the museum underwent significant renovations. Gallery 7 temporarily closed, and curators moved its contents to climate-controlled storage facilities for safekeeping during construction. When the gallery reopened 8 months later, staff members returned the photograph to a slightly different wall location, but that same brass placard still accompanied it. Nobody questioned what they were seeing in the image. Nobody wondered why such an apparently plain, simple photograph merited such an expensive gold leaf frame. Nobody thought to examine it closely under magnification or compare it systematically to other period photographs from the 1850s that might reveal inconsistencies. Patricia Thornton continued her conservation work throughout the 1990s and into the 2000s. She restored paintings for the Baton Rouge Museum of Art, accepted commissions from private collectors across Louisiana, and occasionally took contracts with smaller institutions throughout the region. Her professional reputation remained solid and untarnished. Colleagues described her as meticulous, reliable, technically skilled, all accurate assessments of her conservation abilities. She never told another soul what she had done to that photograph in 1988. She carried that secret alone. In 2012, Patricia passed away from cancer at age 68. Her obituary, published in the Baton Rouge Advocate, praised her contributions to art conservation and her dedication to what it called preserving Southern heritage. Former colleagues remembered her fondly as detail-oriented and passionate about what they perceived as historical accuracy. The photograph remained hanging in Gallery 7, its truth buried beneath layers of black paint. By 2018, it had occupied that same wall for 30 years. 3 full decades during which thousands upon thousands of people looked at an image that had been deliberately falsified, never knowing they were witnessing not authentic historical documentation, but historical erasure driven by personal prejudice. Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell arrived at the Riverside Museum on a cool March morning in 2018, carrying her professional equipment case and a thermos of coffee to fuel what she expected would be routine work. At 42 years old, she brought 15 years of specialized experience in photographic conservation to this assignment. The museum had contracted her services to assess their entire collection of 19th century photographs, a standard evaluation designed to ensure proper storage conditions and identify any pieces requiring restoration attention. The project seemed straightforward when she accepted it. Document each photograph's current condition, note any signs of deterioration, recommend treatment priorities based on urgency and significance. 3 months of steady, methodical examination spread across hundreds of images. Elizabeth established her workspace in a climate-controlled room situated adjacent to the museum's archives. She unpacked her large examination table, assembled her professional lighting equipment, and arranged her personal collection of specialized tools. Magnifying lamps with multiple intensity settings, microscopes capable of extreme magnification, chemical testing supplies for material analysis. The photograph from Gallery 7 arrived on her examination table during the second week of her contract. She unwrapped it carefully from its protective covering, immediately noticing that elaborate gold leaf frame. Beautiful craftsmanship, she thought to herself. Quite an expensive frame for a photograph from the 1850s. Someone had invested serious money in preserving this image. Elizabeth positioned the photograph under her primary work light and leaned in close for her initial visual examination. The image showed a black woman dressed in what appeared to be dark, plain clothing. Her pose conveyed dignity. Her gaze met the camera directly. Nothing about the photograph's physical condition immediately raised concerns. She observed no obvious tears, no excessive fading of the image, no significant emulsion loss that would require urgent intervention. But something caught Elizabeth's attention, triggering her professional instincts. The surface texture around the woman's shoulders and neck region looked inconsistent compared to the rest of the image. She adjusted her magnifying lamp to a higher intensity setting and examined that area more closely, moving her face within inches of the surface. The paint, because she could now confirm it was definitely paint, not original photographic emulsion, appeared glossy when viewed from certain angles. Too glossy. Authentic period photographs developed a characteristic matte surface as they aged over decades and centuries. This particular section looked almost fresh by comparison, as if it had been applied relatively recently in historical terms. Elizabeth's pulse quickened with recognition. She had encountered this exact scenario before during her 15-year career. Photographs that had been altered after their original creation. Sometimes these alterations represented innocent attempts at preservation by well-meaning but technically untrained family members or previous owners. Sometimes, though, they represented something far more sinister. Deliberate falsifications intended to change what the photograph communicated about its subject. She reached for her high-powered microscope and positioned it over a small section of the woman's shoulder area. Under extreme magnification, the layers of material became immediately obvious to her trained eye. Beneath that dark surface paint, she could detect glimpses of something completely different. Lighter tones, different textures, materials that shouldn't exist beneath what should have been a single-layer photographic image. "Oh my God," Elizabeth whispered to the empty room, her voice barely audible. Someone had deliberately painted over the original photograph, covering up whatever had been there initially. Elizabeth spent the next hour examining every single inch of the image under high magnification, documenting everything she discovered with detailed photographs and extensive technical notes. The overpaint covered very specific areas: the neck region, the shoulders, the upper chest area, and both ears. The precision of these locations suggested intentionality. But why would someone target those particular sections of the photograph? What had been there originally that someone felt compelled to hide? She pulled out her laptop and accessed the museum's digital archives, searching for any documentation related to this specific photograph. The conservation file turned out to be remarkably minimal for a piece this old. Just one single entry from 1988. Treatment by Patricia Thornton. Surface cleaning and stabilization. Original integrity maintained. Elizabeth stared at that final phrase displayed on her screen. Original integrity maintained. It was an absolute lie, and she now had the scientific evidence to prove it. 3 days later, Elizabeth stood in Thomas Brennan's office, her laptop open on his desk. The museum director sat across from her, a man in his late 50s with distinguished silver hair and rimless glasses that reflected the overhead lighting. He had held his position for 12 years, carefully maintaining the institution's reputation within the community and nurturing relationships with donors whose financial support kept the museum operational. "Dr. Hartwell," Thomas said, gesturing toward the chair positioned across from his substantial wooden desk. "You indicated this was urgent?" Elizabeth opened a digital folder containing high-resolution photographs she'd taken during her examination. But the 1850 photograph displayed in Gallery 7, the one identified as an unknown free woman of color, someone has altered it significantly. Multiple layers of paint have been applied over the original photographic image, and based on all available evidence, this alteration most likely occurred in 1988 when Patricia Thornton performed what she documented as conservation work. Thomas leaned forward across his desk, studying the images displayed on her laptop screen. Elizabeth had annotated them extensively, using digital highlighting to emphasize the areas where overpaint became visible under proper magnification and specialized lighting. "You're absolutely certain about this conclusion?" "Without any doubt whatsoever. I've extracted cross-section samples from the affected areas and performed comprehensive chemical analysis on the materials. The paint layered on top is acrylic-based, completely consistent with conservation materials that were readily available during the 1980s. It's definitively not original to the photograph's creation in 1850. Thomas removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes with visible weariness. "What do you believe exists underneath this overpaint?" "I can't provide complete certainty without physically removing all the overpaint layers, but based on what I can observe at the edges, where the paint application is thinner, I'm convinced the woman was originally photographed wearing significantly more elaborate clothing than what's currently visible, almost certainly a lace collar, very likely jewelry of some kind. The overpaint application appears specifically designed to make her appear more plainly dressed than she actually was." Why would Patricia Thornton do something like that? Elizabeth had spent 3 sleepless nights wrestling with exactly that question, trying to understand the psychology behind such an action. "I can only speculate based on the evidence, but considering the historical time period this photograph documents and the very specific nature of the alteration Patricia performed, I believe she fundamentally couldn't accept that a black woman in 1850 would have dressed so elegantly, so prosperously. She changed the image to match her personal expectations of how that woman should have looked according to her understanding of racial and social hierarchies." The office fell into uncomfortable silence. Outside the window, traffic sounds drifted up from St. Charles Avenue. Somewhere in the building's lower galleries, a tour group's laughter echoed faintly through the walls. Thomas finally spoke, his voice measured. "If you remove this overpaint and discover what you're predicting exists underneath, this becomes a major story, a potential controversy. The media will report that our museum displayed a deliberately altered photograph for 30 consecutive years." "The museum didn't know about the alteration," Elizabeth countered firmly. Thornton lied explicitly in her documentation. She claimed she maintained the original integrity when she did the exact opposite. "Duh. That distinction won't matter to journalists looking for a headline, or to our donors who expect us to maintain credibility, or to the communities who trust this institution to preserve historical truth accurately. He paused, choosing his next words carefully. Patricia Thornton has been dead for 6 years. We can't even ask her directly why she committed this act. Mr. Brennan, whoever this woman was when she lived in 1850, she made conscious decisions. She sat for this photograph, which required a significant financial investment. She paid for it with her own resources. She chose deliberately how to present herself to history. Someone erased that choice decades later because of their own prejudices and inability to accept historical reality. Elizabeth's voice remained steady but carried unmistakable firmness. Don't you believe she deserves to have her authentic truth restored after all these years? Thomas looked at the comparison images on the laptop screen for a long moment, weighing the professional risks against the moral obligation. He nodded slowly. Do it. Remove every bit of that overpaint. But I need you to document everything, every single step of the process, every discovery you make along the way. If this becomes public knowledge, which it almost certainly will, we need to demonstrate complete transparency about what we found and exactly how we're correcting this historical injustice. What happened next is absolutely incredible. Dr. Hartwell spent weeks meticulously removing that paint, and what she uncovered challenged everything we thought we knew about free black women in the antebellum South. The transformation was so dramatic that when the museum finally revealed it to the public, the story went viral worldwide. I'm going to tell you exactly what she found beneath that paint, who this mysterious woman might have been, and how this discovery changed museum practices across the entire country. But I need to split this into a second part because there's just too much incredible information to cover in one video. So here's what I need you to do. First, make sure you've hit that like button if you're fascinated by this story. Second, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss part 2 where we reveal what was hidden for 30 years. Third, drop a comment below telling me what you think Patricia Thornton's motivation really was. Was it racism? Was it ignorance? Or was it something else entirely? Part 2 drops in 48 hours, and I promise you, what Dr. Hartwell discovered beneath that paint will absolutely blow your mind. I'll see you there.